Hi everyone, welcome to episode 7 of the Anonymous Hedgehog. I'm Rich.
And I'm Maya.
And today we're going to take on an interesting topic. So we're going to be talking about aliens, and whether or not we believe they're real, some of the conspiracy theories behind them, and just what people in society tend to think of. So the reason I thought of this topic is because I've been seeing a lot of memes and just a lot of people spewing things online lately about how terrible 2020 is and how the only possible way it can get worse is if literal aliens came into the world and just started destroying the planet. And I mean, there's a lot of science fiction movies about aliens, but what's actually not commonly known is that most scientists sort of agree that there has to be some sort of life forms outside of the Earth. So, I mean, personally, do you believe in aliens, and do you think they would ever show up on Earth?
I'm not really sure. I guess I feel like my view on aliens is just does it really matter that much whether or not they actually exist? Because I guess the one theory I've heard about this is that the idea is that we're trying to find them first. If they do exist, we have to find them first, because that means that we are the more powerful, more technological society. Because if they find us first, then that means they are more powerful, and and so they could possibly take over us. So I think that's an interesting theory that I've heard, why we're trying to go look for aliens. But I guess it just doesn't really affect my daily life, so I never really contemplate it that much. But I know my dad is someone who really does believe in aliens, and he said when he was younger, he used to dream about being whisked away in a UFO and being the chosen one to start a new society.
That's so interesting, because I feel like parents are generally more practical about these things, or I guess it's so realistic to the point where they defame any sense of otherworldly experience besides for religion.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that we should kind of so easily dismiss kind of those conspiracy theories regarding aliens? I feel like when you say something like that, especially in conversation, you just get this really weird look. Do you feel like we should we dismiss it so easily?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I got a weird look when I proposed this idea to you for the podcast. It's a common stereotype, the guy with the tinfoil hat, sort of panicking and screaming the end is near, aliens are coming. And so, and I think that image is justified because there are people like that who just over-exaggerate. But at the same time, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that seem less conspiracy based and actually seem like they could have some sort of justification. So I know some of the big ones are crop circles, which are basically mysterious patterns that appear on large plots of land that really aren't attributed to anyone because no humans claim them. Some other theories I think are that aliens built the pyramids because it would have been difficult to build such complex structures without modern day machinery.
That's pretty interesting. I've heard the pyramid one. I haven't really heard about the crop circles one before, but I guess I have seen those memes online about just random symbols appearing everywhere. I don't know. I've always kind of wondered this about just conspiracy theorists in general. Are they really that unreasonable? Because I guess the idea is just you're preparing for a worst case scenario, so it's better to be kind of more prepared than less prepared.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between conspiracies for fun and for the point of discussion and paranoia that takes over your life. And some people that have trouble creating that distinction, they end up sort of just hiding in a bunker and actually becoming that person with the tinfoil hat. At the same time, though, it's definitely something we should be questioning. Area 51. It's the most confidential militarized zone, and people don't know what goes on there. And there's been a lot of unidentified sightings near that area, and so it's always always interesting to sort of question what is the government doing. And like, of course, it might not be aliens. It might be like just classified military testing. But at the same time, regardless of what it is, questioning it is an integral part of society.
Yeah, I think I think I agree. Like, I feel like we take a lot of things kind of just for granted, like at least just like what we've been told when we were young. Because I remember like a movie that I was super like a huge fan of a few years ago was The Matrix. And that's kind of the idea. It's just like the whole society that you live in is just like, it's just basically just created like by, it's like basically created by robots to control you. But I guess in this case it'd be like, what if like what if it's like the government, or what if it's like, you know, like other technology that's like controlling us. I think it gets to the point where it's just like, what is like the productiveness of asking such questions? Like, it's almost like the red pill versus blue pill. Like sometimes like you would just rather not know because it's just easier. I think that's why a lot of people just dismiss the conspiracy theories, because it's just like, even if this were to happen, like you don't, even like if the government were just like controlling us, like how would we fix it, right? Like how would we even begin to rebel? And so basically it's just like, you know, like living my normal life is just easier. So like, why would I even bother thinking of that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And there's so many like, this is like a whole category of like novels just based around the idea of like a dystopian government, like a government that like controls its society so completely that the people in the society are ignorant. But it leads to a really interesting question, which is like, would you sacrifice knowledge for happiness? Like the whole concept of like ignorance is bliss. Like, would you rather have blissful ignorance, or would you be aware but face the consequences of that awareness, which means that, you know, you're aware that it's possible to be happier if you aren't in a controlled society, which means that you're going to be sad now because you know that you're not experiencing that happiness.
I think, I guess it depends on like who you are and your, I guess, ability to kind of affect change. Because the thing that I felt with a lot of these, I guess, dystopian novels and stuff, it's just like, it's always like that one person who was like able to affect change, right? But like, if you are not in a position of power, if you're not in a position where you can really do anything, I feel like it would be better to stay ignorant. Of course, it depends on the scenario, obviously, but it's just like it's the reason that those dystopian novels are like cool, it's because like the person knows, right? But they don't just know, they like overthrow the society. But if you don't actually believe that you can overthrow the society, then like you knowing is really just like putting you through the pain of having to live every day knowing that everybody else doesn't know.
I see. Yeah. So what you're saying is that you would rather take the blissful ignorance, given that you're not able to change your situation. But if you can change your situation, then obviously you should like be aware of what's going on.
I think there's also this fantasy. I feel like this is what kind of inspired the entire dystopian genre. It's just like the fantasy of being like the chosen one, you know? I think this is what my dad was kind of talking about when he was younger. He was just like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to be like the chosen one who's like taken away by aliens. And it's just like, if you think like Divergent, which is like a super popular book a few years ago, it's just like Tris was like Divergent and 3. She was the only one who had like all 3, categories or whatever. I forgot it was called. But it's just like, she was this kind of, she was just kind of this like powerful, very headstrong, very like this really like intelligent woman who was able to affect so much change. But that was kind of only because like the kind of character and who she was. And just like, you kind of like, people like to believe that they are the one, but the truth is like, not everyone is that powerful. Not everyone has the guts to affect so much change.
The whole concept of being the chosen one kind of hits home for me too, because when I was like little, there was a lot of times when I would just like lay down and think like this whole world just revolves around me. Like everyone has just been programmed to interact with me, and this is all just a big test for me. Have you ever thought of that?
That everyone is just like kind of designed, kind of like the Truman Show. How like, have you watched the Truman Show? Oh, it's kind of like this. I feel like you should watch it. It's super interesting. Like basically, like it's this guy like Truman he basically like lives his whole life, and it's kind of like the ideal like white suburban life. Like he has a wife, and he just like gets the paper every morning. I kind of forgot the details, but yeah, it's basically the idea. He's a white picket fence and whatever. But like the truth is like he's like this controlled, like he's like in a TV show, and he's the only like one who doesn't know he's in the TV show. So like everyone else is an actor. And so his wife, it's so funny. You should watch it. His wife, there's like these product placements and like, cause people are actually watching this show. So his like wife, who's like he doesn't actually love him, but she's just an actress who wants to get a big break on a show. Yeah. She's like, honey, calm down. And plus use this powder. Like, it's so funny.
That's so funny.
Yeah. I feel like that's what you were talking about. It's just like, what if everyone is just planted on the world kind of to just interact with you?
Yeah, exactly. Or the whole concept of like, what if we're not even humans? Like this is just a dream and we're some other species, but we're just embodying this form of a human in a dream, which is the same concept, because like if life is just a dream, then that means everyone else is a figment of your imagination, which means that you're not dealing with real people. You're just dealing with people that you have created.
Oh, oh my God, I was just reading like something about this yesterday. It was like, it was like this philosophy called, I'm going to say it wrong. It's like Solipsism or something. Like whatever. If you're listening to this, I'm sorry if I said it wrong. But like, it's this philosophy that's kind of like Descartes' principle. Like, I think, therefore I am. But it's just like, basically, it's just like your mind is the only thing that you know for sure exists. And so it's kind of like even more extreme than Descartes' philosophy, because Descartes' philosophy was that like I know, like I'm thinking, therefore I have to exist. But like he was saying, but like this philosophy is saying that the fact that you're thinking only proves that your mind exists. It doesn't prove that you actually exist, like your physical form, or like, anyway, it's just super interesting. And just like,
because you can only be imagining your physical form.
And like, you only have proof that really you exist. Like, you don't have proof that other people exist. That could just be like,
And you have no proof of it, like, even if they do exist, which is, I think that's more practical, because I really don't think that like everyone is just a figment of my imagination. That seems a little illogical to me. But what I do know for sure is that even the individual people that do exist and have their own set of thoughts and set of experiences tend to experience things a lot differently than I do. Like your blue might be my red, and there's just no way for us to figure that out.
Yeah, that's the whole thing of like, explaining color to blind people. And just like, what if we're looking at the same thing, but we just see something very different? It's like, we've been calling this green our whole lives, but we see it so differently. Yeah, and I feel like this is kind of interesting. Like, it made me think of like schizophrenia and like having those like hallucinations. Because I watched A Beautiful Mind, and like, basically it was like this like genius who had schizophrenia, and he basically imagined a lot. Like, he imagined his college roommate. Like, he would tell his wife about stories about his college roommate, and then his wife went back to his records, like, he didn't have a roommate in college. And I was like, what the? It was just such a mind-blowing thing. Like, what if like all of this is just like, like,
what if everything is like that? Like, the fact that people with schizophrenia have such vivid imaginations, like, who's to say that everything's not just a vivid imagination? And who's to say that the people with schizophrenia have like a mental issue? Like, what if they're seeing the reality and we are the ones with the mental issue?
That's true. That's the whole thing. Like people, like, the government outlaws drugs because they don't want you to like see like the truth. Like, like, what if like doing like meth and stuff like that is actually the real world? And
exactly. I don't know where I read it, but I saw somewhere that like LSD and shrooms and things like that, like, there was something about how the drug is not evil. Like, it's your mind that's evil, because all the drug is doing is stimulating your mind to create the images that make you feel a certain way.
Yeah, so maybe like our brains are just like naturally dampened, or like we naturally don't have an ability to And if you think about it, it's really just like are the senses that we already that we already have just like heightened, right? So like we're just seeing more than we would usually see, but like the things that we do usually see could be wrong, or like they could be.
Yeah, and the whole concept of senses is really interesting to me too, because like people that are blind, how in the world can you explain to them like visual perception? Like it's very, very difficult. But for us with five senses, like how in the world can we conceptualize having a sixth sense? Like we can never do that, but there's a chance that like animals or some sort of other species has that sixth sense, but we will just never be able to understand the way they are perceiving the world through that sixth sense because we don't have it.
I feel like this is interesting because this is sort of related, but it's like, I was watching this YouTube video about people who don't have an inner monologue, which is just like people who can't talk to themselves. It was just like, and I was like, yeah, I didn't know, but apparently it's like, yeah, it's like an actual thing. Like people just never like, they can't think to themselves in words, I guess. It's just like they can't talk to themselves. Like if you ever imagine a fake scenario, you're like, oh, I'm rehearsing how I'm going to say this. Like they just can't do that. Right. Yeah. And it's just like, it's so weird because like we've only experienced life the way that we experience. And like we have no idea how someone else experiences life. And so like the fact that these people like actually exist, and they were like, I was listening to this guy interview this girl without inner monologue. She was just like, yeah, like, I mean, like my whole life I don't see it as, because like my whole life I've not had an inner monologue. So I just don't understand the concept of talking to yourself. Like it just seems so like useless and whatever. And basically like everything, and she was describing this thing about how she like processes memory. Like she's like, oh, like I have this web and I have like folders in my brain, and I pull out a folder and then like I see the folder and then I talk, and I'm like, what are you doing? I'm just like, what the? It's like, that's so weird.
I actually kind of relate to that a little bit because like for me, I think probably like 3 years ago, I was a very internal monologue person. Like everything I did, I would say it in my mind first before I said it out loud. And it goes back to our earlier conversation about listening. Like when I was listening to others, I would be thinking about other things in my internal monologue. And then I learned a little bit about like meditation and stuff recently, and the whole concept of meditation is like removing that internal monologue and just being mindful of yourself. And since then, honestly, like I think I've minimized my internal monologue a lot. Like I just don't think as much, which it seems like that would like portray a negative theme in my life, but it actually tends to just make me calmer and not having to like rehearse things in my head and not having to talk to myself in my head gives me more real estate in my mind to spend that time sort of visually thinking about things.
That's kind of interesting because I actually did think about this. I was like, I feel like not having an internal monologue may actually be more efficient, because I was listening to this girl this girl being interviewed, and she was just like, she could be like a speed reader, right? Because like she only visually processed it, and she never like, because the way that most people read is they basically say it to themselves, but like she just read super fast because she didn't say it to her. She just like looked at the words, and we process like visual stimulus, sort of stimuli faster than we process audio stimuli, and so I think that it would like. It actually, like, in some cases, like, we view it as, like, oh, wow, that must be so sad. You can't, like, have these conversations. But she's like, it's, like, more efficient in that case. Like,
yeah, I've seen that speed reading thing. There's a lot of, I don't know if you've seen, like, the apps that they go individual word by word and they speed it up.
Yeah, I tried to do that probably when I was 11, and I just kind of gave up.
I was little,
it'd be so cool if I would just, like, read, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, it's a strategy. It's a strategy where you're supposed to sort of remove the internal monologue. But there's also cases where I think speaking to yourself is very important. Like when you're doing a math problem, like you need to be saying the steps out loud in your mind so that you don't miss a step, at least for me. Or if you're like adding 3 large numbers.
I do that with like arithmetic, like multiplication. I have to like say it because I don't know. It's just like I feel like it kind of like the fact that like when it rolls off the tongue, like you know it better than just like keeping it in your mind.
Yeah, it resonates in your mind better when you say it in your mind. But like if you're visually just, I mean, I guess if you're doing like long division, you can visually see the long division symbol in your mind and do it that way. But I think that just requires a lot of brain power. I can't do that.
I think the problem is that when we process, or like when you do have an internal monologue, let's say when you're doing a math problem, you're processing it twice. Like you're processing it both visually and like in like audioly or like, you know, whatever, like auditory. But then people who don't have it, they're only processing it once. Like they only see it visually, but we like see it both. Like we say it and we see it.
I see.
So like,
Yeah, there's an extra step. You're right.
the truth is like we're doing the extra work.
Yeah. But the extra work sometimes does pay off is what I'm saying. Like the extra step sometimes helps enforce that number into your mind so that you can later use that number later. Like when you need to add, like for example, when you're adding 2 3-digit numbers and you need to carry a digit. For you to be able to carry that digit, you need to have it stored in your memory. But if it's just purely visual, you have to store a whole picture of that digit in your memory, which I think arguably uses up more brain power.
I feel like this brings up an interesting question that was just like, I've actually thought about this before. Like we spend in like an inordinate amount of time just thinking. Like, you know, like I feel like, do you ever get like when people say overthinking, it's like you are spending way too much time thinking. Like we like entertain ourselves with our minds and like we like, I feel like this is how kind of like we said earlier, conspiracy theories and things develop, or like the crazy conspiracy theories. It's just like people just spend way too much time thinking. And it's just like, have you ever like said to someone like, it's not that deep? And, like just don't worry about it. Like, and I think that honestly, I feel like young people and teenagers, like we have like such a problem with this. It's just like, we just spend too much time almost just like self-reflection or like thinking and just like, kind of visualizing scenarios and things in our head that we just like forget that there's an outside world sometimes. Because I don't know about you, but I could like just sit there for hours and just like entertain myself with like scenarios in my brain.
You can? If I just locked you in a room and gave you literally nothing,
I feel like I do that so much every day. Like when I'm like brushing my teeth, I'm bored. I just like talk to myself and I imagine like conversation. Yeah, just is that weird?
I don't do that.
I thought that was so normal. Like I like in the shower too. Like sometimes like I just like make up conversations and I just like talk to myself and I like conversations with people I don't know, scenarios that I would never be in. Like I don't even know. Like
that's so no. Again, I used to do that a lot, but then like I think music is the reason I don't do it anymore. The moment I wake up, I put headphones in and start playing music. And then I brush my teeth while listening to music. I have my whole morning routine while listening to music. When I'm in the shower, I take out my Bluetooth speaker and I play music. Literally every single day. Like if you looked at my like Spotify end of the year report, it's all like almost all day I'm playing music unless I'm doing something that I need to like be actively engaged in. And I think that's taken away from me thinking and planning situations out, which has negative effects on my life. But at the same time, I think it's just made me a more chilled person as well.
Yeah, I think that I do definitely spend way too much time just thinking. And I feel like what you're doing is kind of just like you're occupying, I guess, that space in your brain with other stimuli, right? Because otherwise your brain would have to be doing something. Otherwise you'd just be like utterly bored. So I guess I occupy that time with like just thinking about random things. And then you occupy with music. But like, do you still like before you go to sleep, like do you ever like think of like something you did like 5 years ago and you're like, man, why did I do that? Like, does that still happen then?
I think I relate to that feeling because that's happened to me before. But for me, it's like something has to stimulate that. Like, it's not like my own thoughts will stimulate my memories. And
really?
That's why I always say I have such a bad memory because I'm never thinking about like the past. So when I'm having conversations with you, whether it's like over text or over call. There's a lot of times when you'll mention like a memory of us from like elementary school or something, and that will stimulate something that makes me think, oh God, why did I say that back then? But now, like when I go to sleep, like even now when I go to sleep, right before I sleep, I listen to a podcast, which is like engaging, like occupying my mind, I guess. And then while I'm trying to sleep, I just force myself not to have thoughts so that I can fall asleep quickly. And that's, I fall asleep really quickly. Like I fall asleep within like five minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I fall asleep it takes me a long time to fall asleep. And also like, I feel like what happens to me is just like, it happens so often, like remembering that like awkward memory, embarrassing memory, that like every time I go to sleep, I'm like, okay, you better not remember. But then that makes me remember, and then I end up.
Oh, it's like an everyday thing.
Yeah, it's like a loop where it's just like I'm trying not to remember, and then that triggers my memory, and then I remember. I'm like, oh, like why did I do that to myself? It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. But I do find that like podcasts do help with that. I listen to this podcast called Sleepy, and it like really helps. Like, yeah, I feel like I do try to like, sometimes like when I'm thinking too much, I try to occupy that space with like other sounds and stuff, just to, like stop my mind. Cause it's just really like tiring, you know, like when you actually have to do something and your mind has just been like going for like hours and hours, like you just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. But on the other side of things, like sometimes I really wish I could think about the past more, because I just don't remember like 60% of my life. Like I'm so focused on like exactly now that I don't reflect on the past, which means that I won't learn from my mistakes as well. So I'll keep repeating the mistakes of my past. And I think honestly that whole effect of like thinking about something embarrassing you've done, it's an evolutionary thing, because when you reinforce that was embarrassing, you're not going to do it again. But I don't do that. So I will tend to make the same mistakes over and over again at the expense of not having to think about the past.
I feel like I'm kind of similar to you in that sense, where like, I mean, like these random memories do pop up a lot, but like there, like I don't know, like there are times when people are like, you're looking at like an old video or like a photo album, and like other people are like, oh my God, I remember this time, and it's like it's so sad that we're not in this time anymore. I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like I don't really care. I feel like it's like I don't really have that much emotion associated with it, if that makes sense. Like I know that a lot of people, when they remember a good memory, they just get very sentimental and very emotional. And I feel like I'm almost just like I remember things, but I'm kind of like, especially like I guess like memories of childhood and things, I'm kind of like unaffected by those memories, you know, like because I've had friends that like that like they like reminisce a lot. And I mean, it's like, it's fine, but like, I think I've always kind of had like a forward mentality versus kind of like a back mentality. And that kind of just like, it prevents my ability to be like very emotional looking at things in the past.
Yeah, I relate to that like 200%. I couldn't have said it better myself. Like when I do see old pictures of myself, I feel like the response should be like, oh, like back when simpler times existed.
Yeah, right?
But instead it's like I'm looking at a different person, because I feel so disconnected from the past that I just can't reminisce about it, because it almost feels like it's not me. Like it feels like it's a separate reality that like I exist in my reality, which is the present. And that past picture is a picture of someone else in the past that I cannot reminisce about because it's not me.
I feel like it almost like, I've always thought like, is it really that healthy to like reminisce that much? Because like what I was talking about, like a forward mentality, it's just like I like always just think about like moving forward. Like my mind is always like, I feel like my mind is always like not necessarily like in the present, but it's just like it's always a few steps ahead, and I'm like planning my future out in my mind so much that like the past is just like, you know, it's something that happened. I just don't spend time dwelling on it, because it's just like it impacts my future progress.
100%. I feel like you're just speaking everything that I'm about to say. You are 2 steps ahead.
I just like, right? It's just like it's so weird though, because like I feel like most people are not like that. Like
Oh,
You know, like
definitely.
I see the posts like on Instagram that are just like, you remember these like simpler times, and I'm just like, but it's just, to me, it's just like I'm thinking like the times that I can create ahead. You know, like it's the, you know, the things that I can accomplish moving forward. Because I don't really like, if you gave me a chance, like I wouldn't go back and relive it. You know,
Yeah,
because I've already come so far to where I am today that I don't want to go back.
exactly. 100%. And you know what that means for me, and probably for you too, because I think we have, just by doing these podcasts, I
It's
keep
so
realizing
weird.
how
Like I didn't
extremely
know these things
similar
about
we
you
are.
either.
Yeah, but like what I'm realizing is that like because we're so hyper invested in the present and the future, minor changes in our present and future affect us like greatly. Like for example, for me, when I listen to a sad song, even if I'm in a happy mood, it'll turn me sad in the moment. Even if like I'm not thinking of sad memories. It's just the presence of a sad song has the power to turn me sad because I'm 100% in the present.
That's true. I think that is something that's really true. That's like, your present has just so much of a bigger impact on you because your whole mind and your whole being is kind of invested in it, and you're vested in
Yeah.
like how this can affect like my future performance or like
Yeah.
whatever. That like something kind of like a small, like people say like, oh, in the big picture of things, right? You know,
Oh,
like
yeah.
people are saying like, oh yeah, you know, like you're like in your 20s and your 30s and like in the whole scope of your life, this is nothing. But like since you're so invested in like the now, that like small kind of setbacks can feel very detrimental to you.
Yeah, but they feel detrimental in that moment. But then once they fade, and I'm talking they
Yeah,
fade in like
yeah.
5 minutes. Like I'm talking, I listen to a sad song, I'm sad at the moment. The song passes, and now it's like an upbeat rap song, and now I'm upbeat and happy again. Like it has a huge impact on me for such a small period of time, which I think is honestly a blessing because when you face adversity, when you face like a breakup, or even something worse like the death of someone like close to you, like you will feel like extraordinarily sad in the moment, sadder than any other loved one would feel. But then like a month from now, like the other loved ones will have spaced out their sadness, whereas you will kind of be a little bit more over it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's interesting you say like you spaced out their sadness, because like we're just like, you almost just feel it very intensely for a short period of time, and I feel like that is better because you are able to, like, you don't like not experience the emotion, like you're able to experience the emotion,
Yeah.
but you just don't let it
Yeah.
impact your like your life, you know, you don't let
Your
it
future,
deter like what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole concept of like we can finish right after.
Yeah,
But like
yeah,
it's the whole concept of like a rut when people are like, "Oh, I'm stuck in a rut." Like I'm stuck in like this emotional hole that I just can't climb out of. Like I just think that's such a bad mentality to have because by telling yourself that you won't be able to climb out, you're not going to climb out. Whereas with this sort of short-term memory, it's like, "Oh gosh, I'm experiencing a rut. I'm not stuck in it. I'm experiencing it."
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we'll just end the episode there. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.